This is the late Kel B. Jeffery, an Australian who has spent the great bulk of his life amongst horses. After his death at the age of 78 years, Mr. Jeffery devoted a great deal of his time to demonstrating his revolutionary methods of handling and teaching unbroken horses. The demonstration we are about to see took place on the Goon Muir property of Mr. Lindsay Crawford. The horse supplied by Mr. Crawford being a 2-year-old filly which had never been handled before. The filly has been yarded in a small enclosure and left alone so that she may become accustomed to her new environment. Mounted on a hack to prevent undue excitement of the filly, Mr. Jeffery carefully and quietly lassos her. She comes to a halt when the hack is reined in. Thus, the lasso is prevented from tightening around her neck, which would make her resist. The hack is then removed from the yard as quickly as possible, and the filly stands curious, yet calm, facing her teacher, ready for her first lesson. From the end of a 30-foot lasso, and at an angle to the horse, Mr. Jeffery applies the first move of what he used to call his magic hold, a firm pull with the rope and immediate release. The horse responds and turns her head to face her tutor. Changing his position so as to bring himself again at an angle to the horse, Mr. Jeffery applies pressure with the rope and immediately releases it. This procedure is repeated many times, always with the same method. First, the rope must be pulled at an angle to the horse, which brings the animal's head around to face in that direction. Secondly, relief is given immediately. Thus, in a short while, the horse learns that the rope will not hurt, that the pull on the rope is not lasting, and that the rope will not be pulled from the same direction again once she has responded to its pressure. From time to time throughout the horse's education, it's necessary to prove that man is its master. To do this, Mr. Jeffery applies a firmer method of his hold. With the rope wound about a bollard to assure greater purchase, but in a way that permits immediate release, he intimidates the horse, causing it to rear. While it's on its hind legs, he pulls sharply on the rope, catching the horse off balance and throwing it to the ground. The rope is immediately released from the bollard. This demonstrates a more drastic form of the hold, yet, without cruelty, is sufficient to prove to the horse that man is her master. Once this is achieved, Mr. Jeffery returns to his previous method of appeasement. Note how this horse, now being handled for the first time, voluntarily turns to face her tutor as he moves from one position to another. In less than half an hour, and without violence, he has completed the first step in her education. The second step begins when Mr. Jeffery introduces his advance and retreat method, which will bring the horse into personal relationship with man for the first time in its life. With hand outstretched and lasso loose, he takes his first cautious step towards her and then retreats. He then takes another step as before, but a little longer, and returns to his original position. Again and again he advances and retreats, each time lessening the distance between them, gradually breaking down the barrier of fear and hostility to gain the confidence of the untamed animal. If the horse moves back, Mr. Jeffery moves with it and corrects any impulse to escape with a pull on the rope. This also brings her round to face her tutor throughout. Closer and closer he approaches, ready to correct her with the rope, whilst the back of his hand is offered as a token of mutual understanding. After much smelling, she accepts this and finally succumbs to his touch. Keeping a constant yet light restraint with the lasso, Mr. Jeffery presses firmly from the ring to a point between the eye and the ear, and thence to her forehead. If the horse should attempt to move away, the pull on the rope will again bring her into position, but a fresh advance should then be made to her. After some time spent in soothing the horse, the lasso is entirely loosened, and from now on she can be approached with the hand outstretched. It is at this point, when the horse's confidence in her tutor is still fresh, that the headstall is introduced. Mr. Jeffery uses his right hand to ease the headstall over the filly's ears, while his left hand is employed in placing the nose band in position. The lasso is allowed to fall loosely and is used only to arrest any backward movement by the horse. After the buckles have been fastened, the lasso is gently removed, the headstall taking its place so that there is a continuity of control over the horse. Normally, Mr. Jeffery would regard this as sufficient training for the animal for one day, but to enable the demonstration to go on, the filly was given a short break before being returned to the yard, where she accepts the headstall without fuss. The bit is introduced to the horse, and she takes it with little difficulty. Notice how she chews the newly applied bit, a practice common to all horses when mouthing for the first time. So used to her tutor is she now that she remains unmoved when he leaves her unattended. A short refresher with the rope soon teaches her that the headstall is just as effective as the lasso. The second step completed, Mr. Jeffery prepares her for the third and perhaps the most important step of all, the carriage of men. A different form of advance and retreat is used to start with, that of bumping against her. She soon learns that this is harmless, while the passing of the hand along her back from shoulder to tail accustoms her to having something foreign on her back. Mr. Jeffery furthers this by throwing his arms over the horse's back, and with both feet off the ground, allows the animal to take his full weight. At this juncture, there is no control whatsoever over the horse, and if it should move about, it's important that no attempt be made to drop to the ground until the horse has voluntarily come to a halt. Otherwise, she would think that her tutor was forced off by moving. sequence of events, beginning at the bumping of the horse, is another version of the advance and retreat method. Here, Mr. Jeffery, in preparation for actual mounting, climbs and lies lengthways along the horse's back. Taking care not to dig the point of either boot into her flank, he gradually eases his body back and slides down over the filly's rump. This is done many times in preparation for when he later slides down over her tail. Mr. Jeffery claims that sliding along the back and over the tail gains the confidence of the horse and teaches her not to buck when finally she is mounted. Here again, the horse is allowed to come to a halt before her tutor slides to the ground. Mr. Crawford, in trying this out, demonstrates that although still early in her education, a stranger can now mount the horse bareback in perfect safety. The horse is now ready for leading, and she is led without great difficulty to a larger yard, although gateways have to be passed through and difficult corners turned. The ease with which she is led at this stage depends on how well she has learned her first lesson with the lasso. After a brief refresher with the rope and the advance and retreat, the filly is placed in a corner and the saddle placed on her back without resistance. The saddle is removed and replaced several times before tightening the girth, this still being a variation of the advance and retreat, as well as serving to teach her to stand when being saddled. Sure now that she understands this procedure, Mr. Jeffery buckles the girth strap, taking care not to tighten it so tightly as to prematurely excite the horse into bucking. He next fixes the crupper, making sure to arrange all hair into a comfortable position. This is done several times to accustom the animal to the operation. With the saddle well secured, the horse is deliberately excited, usually by a sudden loud noise close to the head. The filly rises to the occasion with an exhibition of bucking in an attempt to dislodge the saddle. After she has quietened down, Mr. Jeffery can go right up to the horse. Now he commences to mount the horse, slowly at first, making sure to keep his right leg high so that his foot doesn't strike the horse's flank or rump. He mounts and dismounts several times, making the horse familiar with this all-important movement. Finally, he rides the horse to an adjacent yard, traversing the same difficult gateways and corners that she'd previously learnt to lead through. Mouthing by this principle is shown as Mr. Jeffery controls her easily and freely. Further encouragement is given with the open hand lightly striking the rump. At the same time, appropriate verbal commands are introduced. Notice how this horse goes freely from a walk straight into a canter, a fact which Mr. Jeffery uses to prove his contention that horses trained with this method will not buck, but often a new horse will buck if forced out of a walk or a trot. Mr. Jeffery rides the horse back into the small yard, and here demonstrates that his horse will not kick when dismounted over the rump. She stands throughout without becoming restless. Still with a variation of his original hold, he has no difficulty whatever in backing the animal. With no control, she stands perfectly still whilst being unsaddled, the proof of her discipline learnt without any sweat. The most important link in her education has been completed. For the first time, she has been ridden. To prepare her for the shoesmith, Mr. Jeffery begins by gently rubbing from the rump towards the hoof, advancing a little at each time. The horse allows him to lift her leg, and soon she learns to lift it in anticipation. Her education now complete, she is easily led into her new life and follows her master with the confidence which only kindness can bring.